This is the video for lesson 5.5, percents. In this video, you will learn to write percents as fractions with denominators of 100 and write fractions as percents. Cent means 100, so percent means per 100. The symbol for percent is this. A century is 100 years, and cent is the key part of that. A cent is 1/100th of a dollar. In Mexico, a centavo is 1/100th of a peso. So cent also being the key part there, 1/100th of a peso. Writing percents as fractions. In words, a percent is a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. So you can write a percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100. So if we have 60%, that means 60 out of 100. So in a fraction form, we put the parts on top. This fraction line means per, and the 100 goes on the bottom. So in algebra, n is the percentage, so any number that we're looking for is n, and that's always going to go in the numerator, and 100 will always go on the bottom. So if I wanted to find 45% as a fraction, this 45 is going to go in the numerator, and the 100 will go on the bottom. Example 1, writing percents as fractions. Write 35% as a fraction in simplest form. So as we just learned in the last slide, to write a percent as a fraction, you take that percent and write it as the numerator, and write 100 as the denominator, because this means 35 is the part and 100 is the whole. But it also says to write in simplest form. So we need to find a factor that goes into both 35 and 100, and it's easiest to find the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor of 35 and 100 is 7. So 35 divided by 7 is 5, and 100 divided by 7 is 20. Part B, write 100% as a fraction in simplest form. So we're going to do the same thing. The percent goes in the numerator, 100 goes in the denominator, and then we write it in simplest form. If we have the same numerator as the denominator, then that is the same part as the whole, and that's going to mean our simplest form is 1. Part C, 174% as a mixed number in simplest form. Because this percentage is greater than 100, we know it's going to be a mixed number. So I'm going to write 174 as the numerator, and 100 is still the denominator. That didn't change. So how many times does 100 go into 174? It goes in one time with 74 left over. And now in simplest form, I need to find a factor that goes into both 74 and 100. And the only factor that goes into both of those is 2. I gotta still keep the 1 there. 74 divided by 2 is 37, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. Example 2, writing a fraction as a percent. Write 3/50ths as a percent. So we're going to go back to those ratio tables that you guys have been so good at throughout this chapter to help us write 3/50ths as a percent. So if I write it like this, what do I know needs to be in this bottom right hand corner for this to be a percent? It has to be 100. And so now I just need to figure out what goes in that upper right hand corner. So how do I go from 50 to 100? Well, multiply by 2. If I do it to the bottom, do it to the top. Times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So my new fraction is 6 over 100. That doesn't give me my percent though. I need to take it one last step further. If my part to whole fraction is 6 over 100, that means my percent is 6%, which is my answer, because it says write it as a percent. This ratio table again is just a tool to get me that percent. Example 3. A drought affects 9 out of 12 Midwestern states. What percent of the Midwestern states are affected by the drought? I'm going to use a ratio table again. Okay, so if 9 out of 12 states are affected, what percent are affected? Okay, to find a percent, I need that bottom to be 100. And I'm going from 12 to 100. So here's where I need to use a little bit of my skills to figure out what goes here. To figure out what, there's no factor that I can take 12 to multiply by to get 100. There's no whole number. So in order to figure out what's going to go there, and it's getting bigger, so that means I'm going to multiply, I need to use some reasoning skills to figure that out. So if I actually take 100 and divide it by 12, I get 8.33, and it repeats forever and ever and ever. So to test that out, does 12 times 8.33 get me something close to 100? And it does. So if I do it to the bottom, I do it to the top, and as many threes as you add on, the better, because that's going to get you closer to the actual answer. So now 9 times 8.3, and I get 74.9997. And I'm comfortable rounding that to the nearest percentage. So 74.9997 to the nearest percentage, that's going to be 75. So my part to whole fraction is 75 out of 100. And it's asking me what percent. So again, this was all just a tool to help me find the percent. The actual percent is right here, so I need to actually write it. 75% of Midwestern states are affected by the drought.